Watching the Florida Panthers, who the hell am I kidding, it's just Pavel Bure, trot out and lose to the Devils is rough. The sweep was convincing in nature. 3 of those 4 losses were by 1 goal, but alas, the team we've seen this very moment is a franchise stuck in limbo. Pavel Bure and Ray Whitney, both in their mid to late 20s, are the undisputed jewels of this roster. Behind them is Victor Kozlov and not a whole lot else. It does help that Mike Milbury is a confounding idiot and somehow you landed both Olli Jokinen and Roberto Luongo in a trade with the Islanders. The support behind your 2 stars just wasn't there. You traded all those assets for Bure and now he's in a worse spot than he was in Vancouver. But it can't possibly get worse, right? This team, desperate to give Bure a lifeline, anything, signs fellow countryman Igor Larionov, hoping to provide some secondary scoring because God knows the team needs it. I know he's 41, but age is just a number, right guys? The roster is largely the same, and the Southeast Division is wide open. Who's your competition, Washington? Please, give me a fucking break.
Later.
Panthers start season 6-18-7-5. Okay. Maybe there's some competition. This team decided to self-destruct. Other than Pavel Bure, who is leading the league in scoring for the 2nd straight year. The offensive discrepancy is not just bad, it's bordering on historic. Bure will end the season with nearly 30% of the Panthers' goals, which at the time was an NHL record. Finally, the Panthers clean house, firing both Brian and Terry Murray, coach and GM. Brian Murray rebounds in Ottawa and leads them through quite possibly their best stretch in franchise history. Judging by the length of the video, Florida could have used a guy like that. On the same day, the Panthers flipped Larionov to the Red Wings, ending his 26-game tenure in Florida with 11 points. Don't feel bad for him, he wins the cup in the trade next year. As for the Panthers, yeah, no, it's awful. The allure of the 96 run is dead. Nobody is coming to games, and other than watching how much punishment Bure can take, there isn't really a reason to go. Thought the pain was over. Guess again. Watch as both your captain and second best player, Scott Mellanby and Ray Whitney, get moved for next to nothing. If there is a bright spot, any bright spot, it's Roberto Luongo. He looks like a future Hall of Famer, posting a .920 save percentage on a bottom 5 team. You finally have a nucleus to build around. Just don't screw it up. With the current circus going on, top priorities should be keeping Pavel Bure happy. Instead, they double down on misery. If one high-octane rush didn't work, how about 2? Even better, it's his younger brother. Valeri Bure is acquired from Calgary at the cost of your best 2-way forward, Rob Niedermeyer, and a 2nd round pick. That will surely fix their depth issues, because of course the Panthers don't do anything else to address the gaping holes at defense and anywhere not named Bure. Remember, this is a team that had one guy responsible for 30% of their goals. That's not sustainable. The Panthers would go on and select decent option, a 3rd overall pick, Stefan Weiss. Not really 3rd overall pick caliber, but I mean he was better than most of the guys picked after him. But the outlook isn't totally bleak. Just don't look at the skaters. Luongo is the only saving grace at all. The Panthers also elect to go with co-captain approach with Bure and longtime veteran of the franchise Paul Loss. The logic being reward both the best player on the team and the longest serving, with Laus being here since he was selected by Florida in the expansion draft, so there's that. Opening night in Pittsburgh, a 5-2 loss. This team just isn't any good. The false hope of competing in the East with a team like the Devils and Sens with just one man isn't gonna work. And in their first 9 games, Florida puts up a record of 1-6-1-1. The 1 being a tie, I'm assuming you guys know that. Bure has just 2 goals in that span. The team scores more than 2 goals in a game only once. It's not that Bure isn't trying to be superhuman, it's that the Panthers are turbo dog shit. Bure still hasn't picked up his play, and the lingering issue seems to stem around his knee. We'll get back to that later. If there's any solace, at least standout rookie from Sweden, Christian Huselius, seems to be popping off with 9 goals in his first 13 games, winning Rookie of the Month league-wide for October. Pretty funny how the Panthers finally get secondary scoring and Bure dies. The losing continues well into December. The main culprit, the scoring woes have gotten even more dire. By the 33 game mark, the Panthers have only scored more than 3 goals on 2 occasions. And with Huselius' little regression from his 9-goal and 13-game performance, only scoring 2 more goals in the next 20 games, players like Olli Jokinen have not been a factor at all in his career yet, and the splash acquisition of Pavel Bure, the scoring is at DEFCON 1 levels of concerning. Let's see how Rob Niedermayer's career has turned out. Oh wow. The only consistent thing about this team is their very elite starting goalie, who at this point might be in the contention for the Vezina despite being on a bottom 5 team at this very moment. The Panthers though have thrown in the white flag, deciding to clean house, firing head coach Dwayne Sutter, and firing by promotion in the case of GM Bill Torrey. The new man to lead this team on the GM mantle is assistant coach Chuck Fletcher as the interim GM. Now we know Chuck as a genius in charge of the Flyers in later Giroux days. I say genius with massive quotations, but he was with the team since its inception, so ideally he is a man for the job. Weird how they decide to clean house, but still hire from within. Wouldn't it make sense to hire from the outside? Whatever. The next step in the process is hiring the next head coach. So many options to choose from, and the wheel lands on Mike Keenan. Yes, the same Mike Keenan who bullied half of his younger players in pretty much all of his coaching days. The same Mike Keenan who ran Pavel Bure out of Vancouver. Guess what team he's on right now? The same Mike Keenan who turned Mark Messier into a dictator in the eyes of Canucks fans. That Mike Keenan? Okay. The logic with Keenan is he's a lightning rod that can surge a struggling team in the short term and rejuvenize a broken locker room. The problem is that he can overstay his welcome, and teams have quite literally staged protests under his leadership. The team doesn't improve much, and in the new year they sit 12, 21, 3-3, well far of any playoff hope. And with the current structure of this team, the only thing worth watching is Bure, who this season for his standards is having a very disappointing tenure. Then the Panthers make a truly awful trade, trading their bottom 4 puck-moving defenseman in Dan Boyle to the state rivals for only a 5th round pick. Now, was Boyle a good defenseman in Florida? No, he wasn't. He at this point was your average Joe. But the events that will transpire with Boyle being a top 2 D-man on a cup-winning team, and proceeding to be a number 1 defenseman pretty much the rest of his career, being near a guaranteed 50-point guy in his prime. Look, I don't necessarily blame the Panthers here. It's not like he had sparkling numbers for them to justify the rationale of keeping him. Yeah, alas, the Panthers get unlucky and lose a fringe Hall of Fame defenseman for next to nothing. The trades don't end there, as Florida, for some apparent reason, decided to add to the roster, offloading what wasn't a bad package highlighted by Brett Hedican to bring in dynamic offensive defenseman Sandwich Ojulin. This is by far the best player on the team behind Bure, and someone like him is finally gonna give Bure the much needed help he needs. Meanwhile, speaking of Pavel, what is he up to? Bure? Pavel Bure? Oh my god! The Panthers have offloaded Bure for what appears to be a bulk return. Longtime NHL stay-at-home defenseman Igor Alnov, Rangers D-man prospect Philip Novak, a 1st, a 2nd, and a 4th. The Panthers also for some reason gave up a 2nd round pick, and judging by how bad the Panthers are, that was a pretty high 2nd round pick. The rationale being the Panthers need assets, and instead of putting your eggs into one basket, why not go for a greater asset return? And even then, the 1st round pick that the Rangers gave up would end up being pretty high. Not a bad return. But as for Bure, it's a tragic case. He would go a goal per game the last 12 games as a Ranger, but in the next season, after just 39 games, he would retire due to those knee injuries at just 31 years old. A sad case, but for the Panthers, for the first time in a while, made a very smart decision. Let's build off that. As for the rest of the season, the Panthers aren't a good hockey team. I feel like we established this already. Multiple long losing streaks. Christian Huselius seems to have picked up his play a little bit. That's nice. The team is careening down to the finish line, among the worst in the league. There are some core youngsters in Huselius, the very struggling Olli Jokinen recently drafted with Stephen Weiss and Luongo, but it's looking like a start of a long rebuild. But positive news on the horizon. as the Panthers win the draft lottery, given the opportunity to select first overall. You can't fuck this up. What do you mean they traded it? Panthers flipped their first overall pick to Blue Jackets in exchange for the right to swap picks in next year's draft. With there not being a true consensus in this year's draft, it makes sense. The first overall pick was Rick Nash, who would have been a really good Bure replacement. And the Panthers, for some godforsaken reason, would send picks to second overall pick Atlanta just so they would not take the player they wanted in Jay Bouwmeester. Look, weird trade, didn't give much, but still. And Bouwmeester would end up being a very sturdy top 4 defenseman. Betraying the pick that became Rick Nash and getting absolutely next to nothing because, spoiler alert, the Panthers would be worse than Columbus. So that swap never materialized. And with the 9th overall pick from the Rangers trade, Florida would select center Peter Tachek. I don't know. A player that would go on to play a whopping 3 games in the NHL. Now that there weren't really any true regrets, the best players after him were Alex Semin and Alex Steen, but a total missing in drafting might be a future indicator. We'll see. You might think these collections of moves are made under the guidance of Chuck Fletcher, but no. The Panthers have found their new GM. Again, prying away Tampa GM Rick Dudley to take over hockey operations. Dudley does have a good history with bare bones rosters with both Tampa and Ottawa, so there could be something here. He didn't staying though. Praying for youngsters. The roster for next season remains largely the same, adding the 2 youngsters in Bouwmeester and Weiss. The hope is to see progression from the youngsters, of course. The idea of winning has far left the Panthers' thoughts, which makes them still employing Keenan baffling. You have a rebuilding squad and your leader is a man who is universally known as an asshole, regardless of situation. The Panthers start their season at home against Tampa, a 4-3 OT loss, and a gutsy win in Atlanta. Also, scoring 8 goals in those 2 games is definitely a positive and unforeseen sign for this team. Then 3 straight losses in which they lost by a score of 4-1, including the Columbus game, where you probably want that win. For pick purposes, of course. The team isn't all that good, the kids are watchable, and the emergence of now star forward Olli Jokinen is a treat to watch. Jokinen finished the season with 36 goals and 65 points. It's a lone bright spot. His career trajectory was pretty bad, and him exploding out of nowhere is really promising. But this is a team of youngsters. Jay Bouwmeester being nowhere ready to play for the NHL at just 18, and Stefan Weiss being similar. And the only somewhat youngster to even play summer average is Huselius, and even then, he's fallen from the rookie year totals. Panthers trade wins and losses pretty much all the way until a new year where they lose 4 straight, essentially ensuring likelihood of playoffs being non-existent. But due to the excellent, almost superhuman play of Luongo, they're able to scrape by quite a few 2-1 losses and 1-1 games. The record was almost masked with the man under the mask, and unfortunately that would trick management into thinking this team was closer than they actually were. Trade deadline. And there's one move the Panthers address. Pavel Bure has been a complete dud as a Panther, who A, was brought in to keep Bure happy, and B, provide secondary scoring. Neither has materialized, and the Panthers elect to cut bait, and for the second time, they win a Bure trade, getting offensive defenseman prospect Mike Van Ryn in the trade. Getting any defensive help at this point is a win, and one that at this moment can play NHL games is decent. And in the following years, Van Ryn will be a contributor for his Panthers team. Not a good contributor, but a contributor nonetheless. To this point, the Panthers have been relatively mediocre to bad, but after these moves and some injuries, the Panthers absolutely torpedo, ensuring this team's placement among the worst in the league. Along with Jokinen, the only bright spot among skaters are Kozlov, who's still here somehow, and Huselius. If you count Bouwmeester and Weiss playing full seasons as teenagers as a success, I guess. The real bright spot is once again Luongo. At 918 save percentage, playing 65 games on this team is astonishing. Also, a side note, backup Yanni Hermi had a 907 save percentage, but only had 4 wins in 26 games. Gotta love the dead puck era. They were both bottom 7 in goals for and against, a putrid second last in goals for, which indicates just how dire the offense side of the ice is for Florida. And with Mike Keenan not exactly keen on losing as a former Stanley Cup champion head coach, changes are expected, but just how much? The Panthers for a second straight year have won the draft lottery, getting the honor of selecting first overall. You've got to be kidding me. At least in this case, it makes sense. The consensus pick being Marc-Andre Fleury, a goalie, and with Florida already having Luongo, why not get some assets from a hungry team that needs a goalie? And that asset being Mikael Samuelsson and a second round pick. Going from 1 to 3 means seeing Eric Stahl fall from the grabs. Better hope this Nathan Horton guy can make up for it. You may think it's a decent move, remembering Samuelsson from his Canucks days, but there's a reason you remember him from his Canucks days and not his Panthers days. It's because he stunk here. And that second round pick played 20 games in the NHL, 4 of which were with Florida. Hell, the third round pick the Panthers threw in became Daniel Carcillo, an NHL veteran of over 400 games. But hey, let's focus on the player transactions. Your first move is to attack the waiver wire and claim forward. We're really doing this again? Really? Panthers can't really make any moves since nobody wants to come here. What a far cry from what we have now. And your team is pretty much the exact same as last year. Apart from then once again rushing a prospect and having a freshly 18-year-old Nathan Horton in the NHL. Pretty much the same roster. Also, Ole Jokinen is captain for some reason. He is your best skater, but really 1 year of decent production is worth the captaincy. It takes until game 14 for the Panthers to score more than 4 goals in a game. But even then, at this point, the record is 5-7-2. Maybe this team isn't as bad as I initially thought. Mike Keenan is doing a really good job of getting the most out of his players. Let's reward him by firing him. Wait, what? The Panthers have fired Mike Keenan. Look, I'm not defending the guy, but he was not doing a bad job. I mean, look at the roster. GM Rick Dudley wanted them to play at their quote-unquote maximum level. Once again, look at the roster. The interim head coach will be, Rick Dudley. The Panthers aren't necessarily bad during the next 30 games or so, finishing at a record of 12-17 and 9 ties. But there's a reason why the Panthers' offensive struggles are being masked. He will finish the season with, get this, a .931 save percentage in 72 games. He should have won the Vezina, but the overrated Brodeur and Mika Kripasov playing a whopping 48 games somehow beats him. Luongo playing out of his mind covers the awful stench of this roster. One that will need major surgery to repair at this very moment. A lot of the younger players either regressed or took steps back. Ole Jokinen, Husselia, Stephen Weiss, I don't know. Bouwmeester have either stagnated or didn't show much to be considered headliners, and Nathan Horton just isn't ready for the NHL just yet. Pavel Bure looks really good for some reason. He gets a nice return in the deadline, a second round pick that just retires. I swear the Panthers just win Bure trades for some reason. I don't get it. But let's just fast forward to the end of the year because Florida sees a whole 5-point improvement. Still well out of the playoffs, and frankly, unless the team gets like 3 top 6 forwards for some reason and some defensemen, they'll probably miss again for the foreseeable future. This is what you need to realize about this team. It's the worst in the league. Even if there are worse teams out there, there's not a team with a worse collection of skaters either completely washed or way too young to make any meaningful impact. The Panthers we know now have virtually zero problem attracting free agents, but the Panthers of old, especially with no salary cap, had major issues attracting people to come play for their team. And with the issues of spending money to the likes of the Flyers, Rangers, and Red Wings, especially since with such little attendance, there was virtually zero profit being made from the club, as seen from the multiple ownership changes throughout this timeline, and the dud that was the 2004 draft, with only one quality NHLer being selected by Florida, David Booth, in the second round. This team is stuck, nothing is going right, and there's really no chance of this team getting better without a miracle. And because of that, we're about to see a nuclear bomb go off on this organization. First, it's a fresh start. Both Rick Dudley the coach and Rick Dudley the GM, the Panthers elect to hire from the outside world this time, a smart decision for their head coach. A hot commodity recently fired Jacques Martin from Ottawa. An excellent hire. Great at masking defensive inefficiencies, although that Ottawa team was stacked and fell short so much. Whatever, just making the playoffs will be a win for this team. And he did have success with a similar roster in the 1997 Senators, so there is some chance this team can get better. As for GM, it's gonna be someone with tons of hockey pedigree. A member of Stanley Cup champions from the 80s and 90s. A man known for hockey knowledge, it's Mike Keenan. A year after being fired as head coach, the Panthers for some reason have decided to hire him as GM. The absolute peak of hockey decision making going on in Sunrise right now, boys. A man with a hot temper is now in charge of day-to-day hockey operations. This surely won't go horribly wrong. Keenan's first moves, I can't believe I'm saying this, the 2005 draft, where he absolutely stinks it up. A combined 43 games of NHL experience across the whole draft, including selecting a guy who would play a whopping 42 games and 3 points as a forward in the first round. Next pick, Tuukka Rask! Brilliant, Mike. Brilliant. Next, free agency. Keenan's love affair has always been players he's either coached with or against. So here's old ass Joe Nieuwendyk and Gary Roberts on 2-year deals at $4.5 million per year. Mike Jean on a 2-year deal and Joseph Stampo on a 2-year deal. Not bad players for sure, but very old and very little room to fit in the now modern NHL. This is the year after lockout, by the way. This isn't the clutch and grab era no more. Mike, you do know that, right? But would you look at that? Mike has once again let his ego get ahead of him, as they're now having trouble agreeing terms with Roberto Luongo. You know, their best player by a country mile, a consistent top 5 goalie in the league, face of the franchise. Only reason why this franchise hasn't been the worst team in the league year in and year out. Yeah, him. They do agree on a 1-year deal, but this relationship is now ruined. More on this later. The Panthers start the year with 2 straight shutouts. Wait, what? And only give 3 goals the next 2 games. Wait, the Panthers aren't hot garbage? It looks like Jacques Martin's coaching has really done a number on this team. The Panthers trade wins and losses until game 10, where they stand at 6-4. They're actually firmly in a playoff spot. Now, all this team needs to do is play at this level and not let up.
Without a stick, kicks it to Bergeron. Centering pass, score! Shot by Sidney Crosby, stop. Christensen puts in the rebound.
A 12-game losing streak commences. Losses in 14 of 15. Even in their most dire of seasons, they never had a losing streak go this bad. None of the moves have worked out. In fact, they've actually regressed. Vokoun is actually doing pretty good, 22 points, 24 games. Even Weiss is second in scoring with 13 points. And Roberts, Nieuwendyk both get injured. And Stampo is struggling mightily. This team is on a depressing trajectory. A team with playoff hopes is 4th last in the league. By New Year, it only slightly improves to a record of 16, 20, and 5. They're actually not far from a playoff spot, but it would take a miracle to jump the rest of the teams that are vying for that last spot. Lo and behold, just as the team is dead to rights, they spurn a 7-game winning streak out of their asses to make the race interesting. The main candidates being Jay Mobley still exploding onto this team with 46 points, including 39 in his final 58 games. Joe Nieuwendyk and Stampo both going a point a game during this 58-game stretch. And Nathan Horton developing into a nice power forward. Unfortunately, it's too little too late. Despite their best heroics, they missed the playoffs. Shocking, I know. All jokes aside, this year wasn't a complete disaster. Far from it, actually. Pretty much all of the youngsters and even some of the veterans took steps towards being difference makers. And only Vokoun would finish the year with 89 points and a nice fat 4-year extension. He's proving to potentially be a superstar. With the right moves during the offseason and some progressions from the likes of Weiss and Horton, the Panthers have the opportunity to maybe squeak into a playoff spot next year. The Panthers also don't horrifically miss on their 10th overall pick, selecting capable middle sixer Michael Frolik. Now, Claude Giroux was selected 12 picks later, but that's being picky. I'm gonna let this one slide. The Panthers on a roll. I cannot wait to see what the next move is. Oh my god. The Panthers have traded Roberto Luongo to the Vancouver Canucks. The Panthers, similar to the Canucks trade with Bure, decide to go for a bulk return, getting goalie replacement Alex Auld, sturdy defenseman Brian Allen, and the big piece coming back, Todd Bertuzzi. Now, this was a Todd Bertuzzi who the prior year still had 71 points, but this was also the same Bertuzzi who nearly killed a man. He's also 31, and the style of game he plays, there's a chance he might regress. Only time will tell. If the Panthers are getting the Bertuzzi that put up 97 points in the middle of the dead puck era, Hell, even the Bertuzzi of last year, this trade will not be as bad as some will think. There's also Brian Allen, a really highly drafted defenseman. For some reason, he put up 19 points in the OHL. How the fuck did I get selected 5th overall? I don't know. But still, the Panthers are getting a rugged defenseman to support the likes of Van Ryn and Bouwmeester. So that's a plus. And like I mentioned, the Luongo replacement is Alex Auld, who was a former starter in Canucks land. He's as average can get. Was actually a former Panthers draft pick back in '99 and was traded for future considerations. He actually had 1 year of full NHL production under his belt, and the Canucks threw him into the deep end with 67 games, nice, putting up a .902 save percentage and a .294 goals against average. Like I said, average as average can get. But the Panthers, for all the assets they're getting, just gave up Roberto Luongo, a player who will end his career as a Hall of Famer, an Olympic gold medalist, and a large reason why I have a full docu-series on 2011 Canucks. Game players who could make impacts for a player like Luongo. Oh Jesus, the rationale. Also, Auld will not be the starter because the Panthers have signed goalie Eddie Belfour, who at this point is 40 years old. I don't even know why anymore. Right before training camp, we have some news to announce. Only a mere 2 months after moving off for Luongo, Mike Keenan has resigned as GM, leaving the Panthers scrambling for a head mantle. Jacques Martin will play double duty for now, though don't know if that's a bad thing considering what Keenan has done. Panthers start the season by blowing the doors off of Boston. Let's see if that continues later. Then 2 wins, then 2 losses. Then a win, then 2 losses. A win, 3 losses. What the fuck is this team? Followed by a win, then 4 losses. Yeah, this team is so fucking mid. Todd Bertuzzi, who was actually having a decent start to the season, goes down with a back injury in just 7 games. Those 7 games will be the last 7 games of Todd Bertuzzi's career as a Panther. I am not kidding. Luongo for 7 games of Bertuzzi, Auld, and Allen. There aren't that many bright spots. Joe Bouwmeester looks decent. Nathan Horn is a capable top sixer. And that's about it. At least we have Joe Nieuwendyk. We don't have Joe Nieuwendyk. Also, Ed Belfour just injured his backup in a drunken incident in a hotel. We're gonna move past that. A 6-game losing streak where they just got shut out 3 times in a row pretty much puts a stamp of misery onto the season. This team is maddening levels of inconsistent. There isn't really a standout player on the team other than Jokinen. Robert and Stample are old. Weiss is just looking like a 3rd line at this point, if not uneventful 2nd liner. Bouwmeester is sturdy, but that's about it. And with Luongo not here to hide the blemishes, the problems are amplified. At the new year, the Panthers are 15-20-7. However, 2 players have taken any sort of momentum and swung with it. Nathan Horton and Ole Jokinen have formed a dynamic duo. At least as dynamic can be on this Panthers team, let's be honest here. Jokinen will finish the year with 91 points, a career high, and Horton will finish off with 31 goals and 62 points. Although most of the points came on the power play, neither are particularly good in 5v5, yada yada, but at least they're scoring, as the only other skater to crack 50 points will be Joseph Stample. Weiss looks decent, but he's not a top 6er, and Bouwmeester is still Bouwmeester. Other than that, not a whole lot else. Trade deadline, and after a storied Panther career of 7 games, Todd Bertuzzi is off to Detroit for Sean Matthias and a 2nd round pick. A mere pittance of what they gave up to get him. Gary Roberts was also out of Pittsburgh, but not like getting a whole lot else for his services. He is cripplingly old. The Panthers still play maddening and consistent hockey. 2 straight losses followed by 2 straight wins for eons on end. The Panthers are not a bad scoring team. In fact, they'll finish 11th in goals for and 21st in goals against. Ironically enough, it's their goaltending that does them in. Auld and Belfour aren't good enough. With average goaltending in a weaker East, this team makes the playoffs. Instead, they'll finish the year with a 1-point improvement, 86 points. Progression, sure, but with what the Panthers gave up, you want more. Also, speaking of Belfour, he hasn't had a good year. He injures Auld early in the year and gets arrested for fighting a police officer. The 42-year-old will head to Sweden to finish off his career, but after that will officially retire. The end of the year season actually finished with respect to 35 wins, but a mind-boggling 16 OT or shootout losses. Let's say they win half of them. They're in the dance. But alas, I can only watch and hope this drought ends eventually. The Panthers head into the draft with a goal of getting a starting goalie. Weird. And they get it in the form of underrated Thomas Vokoun. The Nashville goalie had been a wall for them during the more grim years of the success, and with the Preds' success, Vokoun was able to propel them to their winningest years to that point. But the logic behind trading him that year was that the Preds actually had a platoon with up-and-comer Chris Mason, who put up similar numbers to Vokoun and he was better at some points. Why not trade Vokoun for a bigger return and roll with Mason? Now Mason would stink up next year, but that's beside the point, because Nashville got a truly astronomical return from Florida. A 2008 unprotected first round pick, a 2007 second round pick, and a 2008 second round pick for the Czech goalie. Look, the Panthers were a decent team and were potentially a goalie away from making the playoffs. But giving up that much, especially that first round pick in next year's draft, is tough. And the Panthers, to add the cherry on top, completely missed on the top 10 picks, selecting Keaton Ellaby. Small consolation in the third round of Gay Dadnoff. Not bad. Free agent decisions aren't exactly headlined, but likes of Richard Zednik, who nearly dies here, Brett McLean, and Rak Dvorak should complement what is looking like a solid top 9. No real superstar if you consider Jokin to be one determined, but loads of depth that can make an impact. The Panthers don't start the season off well with an 0-3 start, then rattle 3 wins. Are we really doing this again? Here's a problem this year. Their goaltending tandem of Vokoun and AHL All-Star Craig Anderson is tremendous. The issue this year is they can't score. The inverse of last year's problems. They also give up a metric shit ton of shots, forcing their goalies to play hero ball every game. Team plays a high tempo style of hockey, leaving opportunities for loads of odd man rushes. But even then, this team doesn't have the talent and finishing abilities to play a style of hockey. You see what I'm talking about? They travel to Ontario and lose to both teams, then get a win in Philadelphia, then 2 wins. The inconsistency is maddening. If Vokoun or Anderson don't play truly exceptional games, the Panthers lose. The defense is behind Bouwmeester, as Van Ryn is an offensive defenseman and being horrible at this year. Ruslan Saleh being an offensive defenseman too, and Brian Allen being the most prototypical burly defenseman you can think of. It's a struggle back there. Look, I want to talk more about the Panthers season, but these 3 years feel like all the same. 10th seed in the East. No real traction being made. They're just stuck in limbo. Like I said, during this time, the Panthers goalies are carrying this carcass of a team to the finish line. After going down to 8-12-1, the Panthers do rattle off a 4-game winning streak, followed by a 3-game losing streak. Nothing of substance really happens until February 10th, when a random game against the Sabres, a freak accident which nearly ends the life of Richard Zednik, would occur. Of course, thankfully he would be okay, but this incident is probably the team's most memorable moment for this year, unfortunately. A week and a half later, the trade deadline approaches, and with the position the Panthers are in, well, they're too far out to really buy and make some noise, but not that far off to completely sell off. They decided to do both. First off, swapping Ruslan Saleh for Carlos Skratskins and a 3rd round pick, and then adding Chad Kilger for a 3rd round pick, only for him to retire right after. After a 3-game losing streak, one that seared Panthers record set at 28-31-8, Florida would rattle off a 7-game winning streak, where they'd see themselves going from 7 points out of a playoff spot to only being 2 games from the big dance. Now all of a sudden, not only are they in striking distance, there's a very real chance that this team can make the playoffs. A shootout loss to Carolina sucks, but they still get a point out of it. Then a win against the Tampa Bay Lightning is huge. But then 3 crushing losses essentially eliminates this team from playoff contention. The Panthers would win the next 2 games and lose their last game, and finish 9 points out of a playoff spot, delaying the inevitable once again. The Panthers actually regressed from the previous year, going back down to 85 points. And if you're counting at home, yes, the Panthers points in the past 3 years have been 85, 86, and 85 points. 3 years of complete mediocrity. After the season, it's announced that the Panthers have hired their new coach, as Jacques Martin will stay put as GM, hiring up-and-comer Pierre DeBoer as the next coach. A good hire, no sarcasm needed. Let's see how they go with this. They trade their best skater. Ole Jokin is on his way to Phoenix for the Panthers special, all bulk return. Keith Ballard, Nick Boynton, and still an 8th second-round pick, which became a player who played a whopping 47 games for them. Ballard being the quote-unquote highlight of the trade, an offensive defenseman, which the team kinda needed to lay out, and Van Ryn regressing. But once again, addressing a need by moving off of your best player, kinda similar to the Luongo trade. Nick Boynton, another defenseman, is the complete opposite. Honestly plays like a better Brian Allen, so at least the Panthers defense isn't looking like it's all too bad. Even with the bad year the Panthers had, remember they traded their first round pick from the Vokoun trade? So yeah, they do end up selecting Jacob Markstrom in the second round though, so not bad. And before training camp, the Panthers decided to move off of Van Ryn in exchange for the hated Brian McCabe. I said hated because he was considered on the hate tier of fucking Stahlin in Toronto. And honestly, this move was such a home run for Florida. Van Ryn would struggle in Toronto, meanwhile McCabe would develop into a very nice power play quarterback for this team. The season starts, another loss, okay. Vokoun didn't have his best outing, and as a result, the Panthers weren't skilled enough to overcome. Then a win, then a loss, then a win, then a loss, then 2 straight wins, and followed by 6 straight losses. Keith Ballard seems to have found a home here, and David Booth is at a 42 goal pace, which is promising. But man, the lack of high-end talent on this team, even before the Jokin move, was questionable. Now it's concerning. The Panthers have a lot of guys who are good at making plays when given the opportunity. Horton, Booth, Weiss, but when the Panthers need someone to score a goal, oftentimes at will, they don't have that guy. Oftentimes, the win comes in full team effort, unlike teams like the Penguins and Capitals who can just throw Crosby or Ovi on the ice and expect magic to happen. By late January, the Panthers are actually above 500, and with a record of 16, 13, and 4, a very respectable record, especially for this team. Really enough, the leading point getter is Jay Bouwmeester, who is playing an astronomical 27 minutes a night. Other than him and David Booth, the Panthers are getting results from throughout the lineup, with 13 players on a team with double-digit points in just 34 games. The offense is there at least, but can the Panthers be consistent? The Panthers are right, and I mean right in the thick of the playoff picture, fighting tooth and nail among the likes of the Habs and Rangers. It is going to be tough. The Panthers are very similar in makeup to the Habs. No real superstar, but good depth, and the Rangers are just King Henrik, honestly. Let's see how this goes. February 28th, the Panthers set a record of 30, 21, and 8, and are in a playoff spot. With teams like the Penguins or Hurricanes clawing at their doorstep, it's gonna be an intense race. The winning is nice, but it needs to continue, because unfortunately, a crippling stretch of 7 losses in 8 games just torpedoes any chance of making ground. Especially that 2 of those teams, the Penguins and Sabres, were teams that the Panthers were either chasing or ahead of. After the stretch, the Panthers are 1 point out of a playoff spot. Not ideal, but with 7 games remaining, there is a chance. And a 3-game winning streak helps matters a lot, as at the 77 game mark, they're only 1 point out. But Montreal isn't letting up. They're also only 2 points ahead of the Rangers, so they can attack from different angles. These next 5 games are oh so crucial, probably the most important since 2000. They need to finish strong. But sadly, the Panthers lose 2 of the next 3, which essentially eliminates any chance of making it, even with a win in their next 2 games. They'll lose a tiebreaker against the Habs, only missing by the literal skin of their teeth. But there's still a lot of promise. Stefan Weiss, of all people, be the leading point getter, finally breaking out with 61 points, followed by a 31 goal season from David Booth. Nathan Horton took a little bit of a step back, but Michael Felique emerged as a capable top 6er. The Panthers were a top 10 defensive team, mostly on the backs of their goaltending, and 17th in goals for is a stark improvement from the offensive stars Panthers of the past. It is clear the Bure system is working. In theory, this is a great building year. Build off of this, and you're poised to make the playoffs next year. Oh geez. A second straight off season of moving off of one of your core players. This time it's pending free agent Jay Bouwmeester, and it wouldn't be Jacques Martin making the trade as he bolted for Montreal. It would be Randy Sexton, and his first move was quite literally this move. The return is negligible. A direct Bouwmeester replacement, albeit worse version, Jordan Leopold, and 3rd round pick. He was a pending free agent, but still, that is just wasting assets. The Panthers then draft someone who could develop into a Bouwmeester, and Russian defenseman Dmitry Kulikov, someone who will make the roster as an 18-year-old. So the Panthers didn't completely whiff on this. Florida goes out and adds even more on defense, signed defensive defenseman Dennis Seidenberg Klingberg, someone who complemented the defense quite nicely. Good moves being made. I don't think I'm ready for his forward-thinking approach. Brian McCabe is made team captain, deserved as he's really helped the power play as of late. And the Panthers fly to Helsinki to play a quote-unquote home and home with the Chicago Blackhawks. They take the split against a team that will win the cup in 9 months, so a good start to the season. They lose 8 of their next 9. This stretch is a story of their season. The goaltending somehow is even better than last year. With Vokoun being a full-time starter, he's putting up Vezina numbers, finishing the year with a .925 save percentage. But in front of him is a team that'll go from a decent scoring team the year before to a team that'll finish second last in the whole league in goals. Pretty much every player other than Weiss, who somehow has been the team's best skater, will regress. And oh boy, has it hit hard. That's the story for pretty much the entire year. Vokoun fighting for his life as the Panthers' high-tempo style isn't effective except the inevitable opposition attack going the other way, and the Panthers not be able to finish. At one point, the Panthers are just mediocre, 24, 22, and 9. Then stumble on a 7-game losing streak which essentially eliminates the Panthers from playoff contention. The Panthers do make some moves, including offloading Steinberg and Leopold, making the defense now awful, and the season ends with them regressing by a whole 16 points in the standings. Now I know this season recap is a lot shorter than previous ones, but this season is so inconsequential with no drama, no player breakouts other than Vokoun, and frankly the top draft pick being Eric Branson. This season is a complete wash. With a dreadful season, in comes some changes, and I mean a lot of changes. As a GM change once again sees Randy Sexton move on, and in comes former Hawk Dale Talon. Fresh off of forgetting to tender qualifying offers to his RFAs. No, I am not joking. But Talon as now acting GM, it's his time to shine. First is moving off of Nate Horton after a down year no less. For a first round pick that became Nick Bukestad, Dennis Weidman, and a 3rd round pick. A truly awful return for what would become a key player on a cup team the very next year. Speaking on the 2011 Cups, the Panthers traded the Canucks moving off of Keith Ballard for Michael Grabner, a 25th pick. Now this is a decent return, other than the fact that he selected Quinton Howden, which became a draft boss, and the Panthers would actually lose Michael Grabner for nothing on waivers, and then watch him have a 34-goal season as a rookie, so oh Jesus Christ. Maybe it's not that good of a trade. The 2011 draft was actually really good for the Panthers, as they would pick both Zach Hyman and Jonas Donskoy. Now the only issue, neither played a game for Florida. In fact, they never signed with Florida. When will the pain end? And in fact, the Panthers the next season would end up being even worse, finishing with 5 fewer points. As for the 3rd straight year, it's Stefan Weiss leading the team in points with 49 points. But in fact, similar to the Luongo days, it's the goalies making this roster more bearable. I said earlier Vokoun was pretty underrated, and I fucking mean it. This man was putting up save percentages in the 920s with virtually zero support in front of him. History sadly isn't gonna look at him with positivity because he's played on some dreadful teams, but good lord, he was a one-man machine. The Panthers of course sell off pieces at the deadline. It's the likes of Brian McCabe, Corey Stillman, Chris Higgins, and Rak Dvorak all get moved off. Then they decide to fire Pete DeBoer. Then both David Booth and Vokoun be shipped off in the offseason. You may be wondering why this video is ending so soon. I mean, the Panthers are still a joke, and they moved off of their best players. It's not like this team is gonna magically get better all of a sudden. I mean, their additions include the likes of Thomas Fleischman, Christopher Stieg, old-ass Holy Theodore, and Brian Campbell. Well, somehow, the next season, this team would make the playoffs and give the Eastern Conference champions Devils all they could, losing in a Game 7 overtime. Oh my god! The 2012 Panthers weren't all that good. They were 6th last in expected goal for percentage, were outplayed at 5v5, whatever. This video is finally over. Now ignore that they would make the playoffs just one more time the next 9 years and took until 2022 to win a playoff series. Look, they made the playoffs. Now this video can finally end, but just for curiosity's sakes, what are the Panthers up to now? I take my pity back.